Yeah, well, as a lot of the Japanese residents and Japanese American uh, were rounded up and interned in many, many camps across the West Coast. And my dad was a businessman. He worked for an import-export company in Portland and Seattle. They had branches in both cities. And he had a lot of business contacts with other Japanese businessmen, companies. So when they interned him, he was shipped to Montana, which was a little bit more than a typical internment camp. And the government was more concerned about him because of his business contacts. And of course, my mom, with an infant son, followed him to Montana. And at that time, it wasn't the best time of year. So when they eventually released him, he was given the choice to go to a regular internment camp or go back to Japan. And he was kind of disgruntled with the way that he and his family had been treated. So he chose to go back to Japan. So they crossed the country from Washington to New York, got on a steamer, and sailed to South Africa. There, they got off the American cruise line ship and boarded a Japanese liner. The American officials and ambassadors that were in Japan at that time then were coming back to the States on that particular ship and then returned to the United States. So anyway, they ended up back in a small farming community in Japan. And the people there thought enough of my dad that eventually they elected him mayor of that small community. But my mother, being an American, she was, looked down upon, got kind of ostracized, and she was the foreigner. She was the American, the enemy. So my dad died there of cancer, but the war was still going on. My brother had passed, infant brother had passed away from diphtheria, and so she was there pretty much alone with me and infant son. And again, she was ostracized for being American, so there wasn't much help from the local community. And I remember hearing stories later about the family here in the United States sending care packages to her in Japan, which oftentimes she didn't receive. But she struggled for a couple of years till the war ended. And when the people there realized that they were not going to win the war, then they came to my mother and asked her to teach them English. So she had some income and some support in that sense. And finally, in 1950, then she brought me back to the States after the war had settled.